So we are continuing our series in Easter Upside Down, where we see where the world is really turned upside down by what they thought was the regular or the right thing to do. And it turns out that something else is the right thing to do. And last week we took a look at some things that are better upside down, like pineapple upside down cake and bats are two things that we discovered. There's not a lot of things that are better upside down, but a few things are. And so today, we are taking a look at another moment where Jesus turns things upside down to where it's actually the right way and not backwards. Now, there are many meals eaten in the Old and New Testament. I don't know if you've ever looked through meals that are eaten. I hadn't until this week, but there are a lot of meals that are eaten in the New Testament, and many of them are very powerful. We see one where a lady is about to make a small cake of flour with oil, and then she and her son are going to eat it and then die, is essentially it. And a prophet goes and spends time with them and says, make me dinner first, and then you guys go. That's asking a lot. And yet, through that item of faith, through that time of faith, that widow and her son last through an entire famine by saying, okay, yes, we will take care of you, and then we'll eat. And they never ran out of flour and oil. And it always made me wonder, did the cakes get bigger, that they were working on and as they were eating? But there are a lot of meals, and lots of them are great. Most of them are fantastic things. But there's one meal that actually brings disaster on the world. See, we're going to start back at Genesis. In Genesis 1 and 2, we see God create everything out of nothing. Now, we create things out of something, but God creates everything ex nihilo. Out of nothing, he creates it. And he speaks. And just before God's done, he creates man. He forms us out of dust, and he breathes life into us, and man is created. And then he says it's not good that man is alone. And so he does the first surgery and takes a rib from Adam and creates Eve from the rib. And we have man and woman at the end of that. Now, we don't know how long after this creation occurred that catastrophe falls, but we do know that it can't be extremely long. We also know that they're spending time with God in the garden. They had walks with God in the afternoon in the cool of the day. And we know that they were enjoying that actual relationship that is not a distance relationship. We have a relationship with God now, but it's one where he is in heaven and we are here, and there's not that walking side by side in the same way. Like my wife and I would walk side by side through the empty stores, because nobody's there. And so we're walking together, and God is walking with us, and yet it's different, right? Well, when Adam and Eve is walking with God, he is there in a very physical sense, and he's walking and he's being with them. And they're enjoying this Garden of Eden, this place that God put together. How amazing is that? Well, before the fall, before this catastrophe of meal, there's no sin, there's no sickness, there's no death. This pandemic that we've been going through, the fear that is in people's hearts, isn't there. It does not exist, partially because there's only Adam and Eve, but partially because there's no sickness, there's no death. They're working in the garden, and work doesn't have that toil feeling where you go out and you feel like you've done a ton, but nothing really got done, and you have to go do it the next day. My brother and I used to mow lawns, and we would mow 15 lawns in one day because we were working at a camp the rest of the week. And every week I had to come back and mow those stupid lawns. Nothing stayed done. I had to redo it in a week. That was nice for the pocketbook. But as far as getting things done, that's just annoying. Well, there is a meal that messes up all of that. We're going to go to Genesis 3, 1 to 17. Let's take a look there. Genesis 3, verses 1 to 17. It says, now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God actually say you shall not eat of any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. And when the eyes were both opened, they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made for themselves loincloths. You know, it starts off with falling for a lie. You see, they had a small snack, just a tiny meal, if you would, a wonderful garden picnic, if you will, and it was one that turns out to destroy humanity. You might say that I'm overstating it, but in quite reality, I am not. I'm probably understating it. Adam and Eve fall for the lie of the serpent. They want to be like God. They want to be like God more than they want to trust God. I mean, have you ever been in that situation where you want to trust God, and yet you also want to be in control? That simultaneous battle that we all have. And so God already told them what would happen to eat the fruit, but they didn't really believe what God said in its entirety, or at least didn't believe him as much as they believed what the serpent told them. Let's look at what God said. In Genesis 2:15 to 17, just a little bit back, it says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." Now, I don't necessarily know that Adam knew what die means, but I'm pretty sure he knew that it wasn't good. All right? So he knows that whatever it is, it's bad. Now, Adam's also not a fool. Adam has years of knowledge that he was created with. He's not an idiot. It wasn't that he had to invent fire and the wheel necessarily. I don't know what he started with and what he didn't. But what I do know is he knows things that we don't think he knows. The sin of death is linked to sin. The curse of death is linked to sin. Now, sin means missing the mark. It's an archery term. And, okay, I have to admit, I've been watching Top Shot, that TV show a while back, and they're not making anymore, but, man, I've been watching that, and these guys are really good. And I've noticed that they don't always hit the very center of the bullseye, okay? Now, if they don't hit the very center of the bullseye, it's considered not as good of a shot as someone who hits the very center of the bullseye. Now, it may not seem like a big deal, but if you and I are in a competition and I get in the red, you know, that red dot in a target, and you get the very center of the red dot, you win. Well, the only way that we do not sin, we do not miss the mark, is hitting the very center of the bullseye of God's law. Wow. I'm not even hitting the red most of the time. And yet the very center is what is required. The curse of sin is the curse of missing the mark. Adam and Eve never missed the mark beforehand. And yet, after they ate the fruit, they never hit the bullseye again. How incredible is that? So, you have this rebellion against the king and the creator, causing this missing of the mark of God's law. And they didn't trust God that he had their best interest at heart. They didn't trust him that God would know the outcome of what they were trying to control. They didn't know that God would know the outcome of them trying to take the matter into their own hands, of them trying to be like God. It was all because they believed a lie. Back in Genesis 3:2-4, we see the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit that is in the midst of the garden, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." But the serpent said, "You will not surely die." Interesting. Eve fell for it first. But quite honestly, Adam was right there behind. And they rationalized their decision. And it looked good. It would make them wise. It would be a good idea because they would get wisdom. They would get more from it, more education, more development, more culture, if you will. And they took and they ate it, the very first recorded meal. In Genesis 3:6, we see that. So the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes. And the tree was desired to make one wise, and she took the fruit and ate. And she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. They sinned. They missed the mark. And are we really so different? No. We rationalize our own decisions, don't we? We say, we shouldn't do this, but it's all right because of this or because of that. I really shouldn't allow my emotions or my anger or my fear to take hold of me, but it's okay because everybody else is. Or, well, no one else is going to stick up for me. Or a myriad of other reasons. And yet, we sin. So, what did happen with Adam and Eve? Was God a liar? No. Their eyes were opened, and the snake was right. There was wisdom. And they realized they were naked. Now, without sin, there was no unfillable want. So there was no lust, there was no envy, no covetousness, no pride. And these things would never occur without eating the fruit. And therefore, clothing would never be needed. But that didn't happen, did it? They ate the fruit. And so what did they do? They fashioned coverings for themselves to hide their nakedness. Now, what's really interesting is what did they try to do that with? Fig leaves. First of all, I don't know where you find fig leaves, but they must have been plentiful in the garden. But on the flip side, how do you sew those together? This is why I think they know things I don't know. Not just about sewing. I was taught a little bit about that. I can put a button back on a shirt, I think. But sewing plants together, that's pretty interesting. But then on the flip side, how long are leaves going to last as a garment? Most of us, they wouldn't last a day. I would need several as bibs just to keep changing out as I eat. You know, it's not a great item to use as clothing, but they're using what they have. They tried to hide from God as well. They tried to hide from the one that created them, the one that loved them, the one that would spend walks with them in the afternoons. And in an attempt to be like God, Adam and Eve could clearly see now that they were not. And on that day, with that measly snack, sin entered the earth. The curse leading to death was passed from humanity to all of creation. It says in Romans that all creation groans. It's seeking that redemption. And the curse that led to death was passed down through all humanity. We all have it. We're all probably going to die unless Jesus comes back. And just as God said it would happen, death occurred. Now, we're going to pause just a second. What is death? When we're talking about death in our context, or when I say death up here, and pretty much whenever I say death, what I'm referring to is a separation. You see, God and man are now separated. There was a death. When we physically die, our body remains here, and our soul and spirit are separated. There will be a second death for some people who do not trust Jesus as their Savior, and there will be a separation, eternal separation between them and God. You see, death is more about separation than it is about a physical manifestation that occurs. Though that physical manifestation is a real thing. it's almost an illustration of what occurs on a spiritual level. You see, we start off spiritually dead, spiritually separated from God, because he is life. And without him, there is no life. So, this was not the only meal, however, to change the world. We're going to fast forward to the New Testament. And in all four Gospels and in Paul, they all refer to something we call the Last Supper. And it's the last meal Jesus enjoyed with his friends. And probably the last meal he enjoyed, definitely the last meal he enjoyed at all before he was crucified. But it's the last meal he enjoyed with his friend. And they were celebrating something called the Passover. Now, the Passover was a special meal that celebrated Israel being freed from Egypt. Some of you might remember where we covered this probably a year ago, now that I think about it. But Joseph was the son of Jacob, and he went to, he was kind of a punk to his brothers, let's be honest. But he turned into a great guy. And his brothers turned out to sell him to Egypt as a slave. And in the process, he became a great keeper of a house. He was then thrown into prison because the man's wife said he was going to do unspeakable things to her, even though he was innocent. And while he was in prison, he again becomes a great keeper, this time of the prison. He learns that he's able to tell people what their dreams mean, and eventually he tells Pharaoh what his dream means and becomes promoted to the second in command over all Egypt. Only Pharaoh is greater than he is. And in that time period, he stores up huge, vast quantities of food so that when there's a famine, all of Egypt will be saved. Well, during that time, his brothers and his dad and all their families, while they were in the famine, come to Egypt because they don't have any food. And in that process, they end up moving to Egypt. Israel, the nation, though as small as it is, was saved. However, through the years, Pharaoh doesn't remember Joseph. And he thinks he's in charge. And he takes all of Israel and places them into slavery to the extent that all their boys had to be either killed on the spot or eventually thrown into the Nile River where they would drown, the crocodiles or whatnot would get them. It was messed up. And they yearned to be free. So what does God do? He sends Moses and says, "Let my people go." You ever see the Ten Commandments movie? Yeah. Some of that's in that movie where they have different plagues. God sends different plagues, and Pharaoh keeps saying, "Okay, you can go," and then, "Nah, bad idea. That would be really bad for our economy. We're not going to let you go. You guys need to stay here." And eventually, he sends the last plague. Now, the last plague is the angel of death. It is where the firstborn of all people and animals will be killed by the angel of death, unless they are in a house with blood over the top of the door and down the sides. Almost makes this little cool cross thing on the two sides of the door. But the image is that they believe, and a lamb has died, and they're eating this lamb that they've roasted inside. Now, they didn't have time to make bread the normal way with yeast. And so they made bread with no leaven or yeast, and they were standing around the table eating this lamb because they were dressed, ready to go. It's kind of like when you're emptying the fridge and you're ready to go on a trip, and you're just standing there eating because you don't have time to sit down. You got to get out of the house because if you sit down, you're going to spend like 3 more hours and you're never going to make it to where you're supposed to go on time. I mean, I've never done that, but I'm sure, Well, that's what's going to happen. The angel of death is going to come, and fear is going to come over Egypt, and they need to get out now. And so they're eating this Passover meal. Passover because the angel of death passed over them. Well, in Jesus' time, it's been at least 2,000 years since that's happened, and yet they're still celebrating the same meal, the same remembrance of what God has done. So, today's the Last Supper because it's the last meal Jesus has taken before he went to the cross. And this meal, or Last Supper, is talked about in several places. Now, you might know Dr. Swindoll. He made some really interesting insights that I've summarized a little bit. First of all, Passover was just around the corner, and it was the beginning of an 8-day celebration. And it always occurred on the 14th day of the first month in the Jewish lunar calendar. Now, the Jewish calendar is still lunar. That's why Easter Sunday always moves on us, okay? That's why when we have Easter is early this year or late this year, it always moves because it's based on the moon, not on our normal solar calendar. Now, preparations for this meal had to be made way in advance. It took weeks for Jews all over Israel to come across the empire and to come to Jerusalem and to find lodging to prepare for the most significant meal of the year. Now, think of the Super Bowl, okay? Or a Rose Bowl or Orange Bowl. You know, you got games going on. You got people making plans for these games. Even if their teams aren't in it, they're getting things ready year in advance. Or, Becky and I have this, we're a part of this club, you know, where you get points and you can use them on different places that you go, but you can't use them until, like, they open the gate to try to get your place, like, a year out. We were like, hey, let's go to Yellowstone. And God said, not this year, which turned out really good not to go this year. But anyway, to get in, you have to prepare in a year out to get your room, to get things prepared. Well, this is even bigger. People are preparing their food. People are preparing their place to be a year out. It's almost like pheasant season for hunters here in South Dakota. They're preparing to come to get things together. Now, Jesus would have instructed his disciples to select a lamb and to locate a secluded private room on the second floor of someone's house. And in keeping with the law, that room had to be purged of yeast for 2 days before Passover. No yeast at all. The year of this Passover was at sundown on Thursday. Interesting note, there were two groups of Jewish people at that time, and some celebrated things starting at 6 a.m., and some celebrated things starting at 6 p.m. So you actually had almost like, can you imagine Black Friday, but two groups of people celebrated Black Friday starting at different times? Some started at midnight and some started at noon, and the stores are just packed all the way through. Well, you are going to have people sacrificing lambs, Jewish people sacrificing lambs as an illustration of what's going on. They would take a lamb, and about 3 o'clock, a Levite would blow a ram's horn, and worshipers would fill the temple, and massive gates would open up, and each worshiper would kill his lamb, would skin it, would drain its blood into a basin. And it sounds really brutal at that time, but if you're going to have meat, this is what you did back then. If you're a hunter, you're like, no, we do this on a normal basis. Maybe not the skinning right then and there, but Passover lamb was a special significance. It was killed in the temple to consecrate or dedicate to a special purpose. The purpose of that Passover lamb was a substitute. It was a picture of what Jesus would be. It was a lamb that pictured a peace offering. The lamb's fat and the kidneys would be burned on an altar as part of that peace offering, which signified friendship between God and the worshiper. Now, because they had two different time periods, those priests are working almost around the clock to get all of these people together. Remember, Jerusalem is the capital of a nation of Israel. I don't know how many people that is or how many families that is, but could you imagine the entire state of South Dakota meeting in Pierre for a event like this, where every family brings this lamb to be slaughtered and have a meal there? It would descend on this town and be huge. Could you imagine the Black Hills all meeting, say, in Hill City or Custer or Rapid, and we're all going to do this one event together, each family individually and simultaneously everyone together? This is a big, big deal that happens. Well, after the sacrifice was complete, each household representative would take their lamb over his shoulders and they would take it home. And they would roast the meat in preparation for the dinner. And just like the first Passover in Egypt, the disciples would do the same thing. They did the same thing year after year, and they were doing it today. And they would smear the blood on the doorpost and the lintel and the main entrance, and they prepared the other elements, the meat, the herbs, the bread, and the wine. And then Thursday evening, just before sundown, Jesus and his disciples would arrive. They'd enter the room, and a servant would have been available for them to loosen their sandals and rinse their feet. Because remember, the roads here are more than just dirty and grimy. When you go out hiking and you've got your awesome sandals on your feet, so that way they can breathe and you have plenty of, it's just great to hike. They get dirty. They get sweaty. But on top of that, they had animals in the streets and people's excretions, if you were, running down the sides. This wasn't a place with indoor plumbing necessarily. People's feet got nasty. And so there'd be a servant, the lowest of the low, that would wash their feet. And yet, they were alone. The disciples, I'm sure, were laughing, and they were talking and laying down on a cushion and propping themselves up near the table. But only two of them would know what was coming. Only two of them would know. And after Jesus would settle to his honored place at the head of the table, he would light the ceremonial lamp to signify the end of work and the beginning of the celebration. He'd fill the first cup of wine. There are 4 cups, and he would fill the first. He'd hold it up and give thanks to the Father and dedicate the evening to the remembering the Exodus. And after each man would drink his wine, well, let's see. In John 13, 1 to 15, it's a longer section, but let's see what happens here. John 13, 1 to 15. It says, Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And during supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured the water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and wiped them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, and he said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered him, What I am doing you do not understand now, but you afterward will understand. And Jesus said to him, You shall never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. And Jesus said to him, The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. And that's why he said, Not all of you are clean. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place to them, or said to them, Do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Interesting. Jesus washes the disciples' feet. He takes that most lowly of positions, though he is God incarnate, God in flesh, and quite honestly, their teacher, the one that's in charge of them, he washes their feet. I think John here is the youngest, so it would have been easy to say, John, hey, wash your feet, man. I don't want to wash our feet. I know, bro, but you're the youngest. You're the closest to the ground. Just get her done. That's what we would do, isn't it? I mean, some of the time. Not me personally, but yeah, that's what we do most of the time. And yet Jesus washes their feet. What a difference. You have Adam and Eve at their first meal desiring to be like God, and then you have Jesus demonstrating at his last meal what God in the flesh truly looks like. You have Adam and Eve taking and eating, their eyes being open, realizing they are naked. They were just trying to ascend into greatness. In total contrast, there is Jesus. Jesus rose from the dinner table, disrobed his outer garment, took a towel and a wash basin. He demonstrated servant leadership and the love of God and what that looks like. He took descending steps into greatness, whereas Adam and Eve tried to ascend steps to greatness. He redefined what God was like before his disciples' eyes. He washed their stinky, dirty, crusty feet as a servant would. Jesus demonstrates what it looks like to love at the humblest level imaginable. And this is the kind of love that turns things upside down. This is that act that Jesus turns things upside down. And Jesus told his disciples what he came to do. In Mark 10:45, we see, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve." And his disciples aren't going to get this until later. And quite honestly, we don't usually get this until later. I don't usually get this until later. His disciples don't understand, but Jesus being back at the head after washing his feet gave new meaning to an old remembrance of God's faithfulness. In Matthew 28, we're going to see how Jesus takes the Passover and makes it even more. Matthew 26:25-29. Judas, who would betray him, answered, "Is it I, Rabbi?" He said to him, "You have said it is so." Now as they were eating, Jesus took the bread, and after blessing it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink it, all of you. For this is the blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it with you in my Father's kingdom." Jesus starts to reverse the curse. And he will reverse the curse entirely when he rises again in a few days. But he begins the process. Adam and Eve took and ate because they wanted to be like God. And now Jesus says, "Take and eat," pointing to himself. Jesus is the only way to turn things right side up. And the world being turned upside down because of sin and death, brought from the misactions of the first meal, now turns things right side up. He shows us symbols of the way of the curse in Eden is being reversed. By breaking of the bread symbolizes the breaking of his body on the cross. The drinking of the wine symbolizes his blood being poured out for our sins, just like that Passover's lamb was poured out. So the Last Supper. Now, the Last Supper will always point to the cross. The cross is going to be a moment in time where God in the flesh dies in our place. His sacrifice on the cross would wash us clean from the effects and the curse of sin, that missing the mark. Found in our hearts and lives, that caked in sinful disobedience, that separation from God. What Jesus was about to do on the cross is symbolized through that lamb. Now, remember Adam and Eve? Remember how they realized they were naked and they tried to fix it? Genesis 3:7. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths. Now, they tried to fix it through sewing together leaves, but they can't fix the problem. All right? They can't fix it. It's a problem that's unfixable in their situation. And yet Genesis 3:21, we see, and the Lord God made for Adam and his wife garments of skins and clothed them. You see, right there was the first sacrifice for them, the shedding of blood, the covering of them. It was covering in something that was going to last a long time, but not as long as Jesus' sacrifice for us. You see, when we place our faith in Christ, we have an eternal security with him. We're no longer under the law. We're under grace. We have that connection with him. We have a problem. Evil runs rampant. Sickness runs rampant. Death runs rampant. And it's not going away anytime soon. But God can fix it. In fact, he did. And if we place our faith in him, we can be with him. God can truly cover those who are suffering from the curse, just like Adam and Eve are. God can cover and deal with that kind of guilt and shame resulting from our sin. And Jesus, in our story, is about to do that on the cross. But in history, he has already done it. Jesus, breaking the bread and the words, "Take and eat," is going to haunt hell for eternity. However, Satan is not going to go down without a fight. You see, in the story, Satan too was at that meal. In fact, Judas was right there to betray. But we're going to talk about that in a little bit later. For now, the reverse of the curse is underway. It's a meal that he would never forget. And the disciples and us today will always remember. Bottom line today, guys, is let's place our full trust in Jesus. Let's not be like Adam and Eve, who trust the promise of something else more than they trust the promise of what is around them. Let's not be like Adam and Eve, who tries to fix the problem with leaves, things that perish and go away, rather than God's solution of eternity. Let's trust Jesus entirely. Right now we've been blessed. We don't have a lot of that, the corona around us. But that won't always be that way. We need to trust Jesus fully. That when we are well, he takes care of us. When we are sick, he's in charge. And even if the worst thing should happen, he is still in charge and will take care of us. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much, Lord. Thank you for doing these things, these painful things that you're going to go through here in a few days in our story, but you have already done in eternity. Father, thank you so much for being in charge and being bigger than all of our struggles and pains. Father, as we give our offering today, Lord, we pray that you would take these things and use it for your glory and your kingdom. Father, we love you, and we don't know what the future is. We can't know what the future is. But Father, help us to fully trust you, that unlike Adam and Eve, we would rest on what you say, and knowing what you're going to do is the right thing. In Jesus' name, amen.